Eating and caring in the city. I hope everybody has a nice lunch break and is now fit again for panel 2, and also a warm welcome to our new guests who joined the symposium now for the second panel. My name is Bernadette Krejs. I'm from the Department of Housing and Design from the Technical University in Vienna, and I have the honor to host panel 2 here in the framework of this symposium. We're jumping now in scales. For the audience who was already here in panel 1, we more or less were debating about the scale of the city and food. And now we're jumping to the scale, let's say, of the building, of the apartment, of the kitchen, or to the table finally. And the title of panel 2 is At One Table, Eating as an Eco-Social Living Practice. And I wanted to introduce you to this panel with a quote from one of our speakers, Gabriela Zegarra, where she wrote, and I quote her now, "Through the act of sharing food with others, tables and kitchens can be seen as an everyday care infrastructure." And I think this quote shows very beautiful that common eating is more than the supply of the human body with food, that it can also be seen as a social spatial practice which needs adapted, transformed, and new or rediscovered spaces. In panel 2, we will learn more about these other spaces, these tables of communities that enable an eco-social living practice. We will have also 3 inputs here in panel 2 now. There will be 3 inputs. We will start with Julia van der Mende. She is from the Bauhaus Universität Weimar, and she will speak about the spatialization of contemporary eating practices between kitchen and the city. There will be a second input by Maya Scheibler from the architecture studio Scheibler Villard Architects in Basel, and she will speak about the LeNa Haus in Basel. And the third input is by Gabriela Zegarra. She will speak about cooking with the landscape, collective cooking and gardening in Peru and Switzerland. And I think it's very beautiful that we will jump in geographies, that we will have crossroads between theory, practice, and activism. And I'm very much looking forward to the 3 inputs. And after the inputs, we will have a panel discussion where also Lisa Platter from the community cooking from the Caritas district Vienna will join us for the discussion. And you also as an audience, you are invited to join our conversation as well. Again, I want to say to our speakers, please stick with the time, that we have still time for the discussion afterwards. So let's start with Julia van Mende. I just want to introduce her very briefly. Julia van der Mende is an architectural theorist specialized in empirical investigations on spatial structures and everyday practices, including eating and housing. She earned her doctoral degree from the Aachen University, focusing on spatialization of eating practices. Currently, Julia van Mende is based at the Bauhaus University in Weimar and is there an active member of the interdisciplinary research group Krise und Transformation des Eigenheims. She also has contributed to the project Anthropocene Kitchen, and she's also an editor and a journalist for various architecture journals like Art Plus or Daedalus. And she's author of this wonderful book here, and I hope you will give us some glimpses and insights about this very interesting book. So Julia van der Mende will speak about the spatialization of contemporary eating practices between the kitchen and the city. And please, Julia, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Bernadette, for this nice introduction, and thank you, everyone, the whole team from the RZW, for the invitation. Thank you, Angelika and LeNa, for curating this. I love this place. I'm really happy to be here today. Actually, I adjusted my talk a little more to the topic of the panel that is to come now. So it's not going to be like the whole topic of between kitchen and the city. I was rather questioning at one table, really. So I would like to present some insights now from an empiric study on the spatialization of eating practices in German cities, particularly in Berlin. In line with the panel theme, At One Table, I will delve into some variations or into some aspects of community that emerged from this study. Maybe I go here. Okay. The research was completed in 2019 at the Faculty of Architecture of the Aachen University, and I think some Aachen University was mentioned today several times already. And prior work was conducted at the Cluster of Excellence, Image Knowledge Gestaltung at Humboldt University in Berlin. And as Bernadette said, currently I am doing research as a postdoctoral researcher at Bauhaus University, focusing more on housing practices. So I'm broadening up a bit the scope. Cooking is extremely fashionable in today's media discourse, and there is a fascination with food preparation and eating. In contrast, statistics on time, budget, and representative studies, mainly from the health sector, indicate that on the long run, cooking at home is decreasing. Well, I did the study before the pandemic, so things might have changed a bit since then. Respondents frequently cite a lack of time as a reason for not cooking. And in terms of cooking frequencies in private households, Berlin is at the bottom of the league in Germany as a whole. So here in 2016, for instance, only 1/3 of the households were actually cooking daily at home. At the same time, sales figures from kitchen manufacturers show that German kitchens have never been as well equipped as today, and the sky's the limit there. The journalist Michael Pollan describes this paradox as following, I cite, "The less cooking we are doing in our own lives, it seemed, the more that food and its vicarious preparation transfixed us." So meanwhile, the number of fast food outlets and delivery service is on the rise. From burgers on the move to coffee to go, we have heard about that already, and it leaves its traces in the form of littering in the city. So it actually, the way we eat shapes the city in different forms, and we have discussed that already in the first panel, and this is kind of one red thread that in a way goes through this symposium today. Food and beverages are being consumed in almost every conceivable space, with little regard for a designated table or even a table. There are a few places where people don't consume food or drinks, for instance, maybe restrooms or the interior of a church, but there, food consumption has another meaning. So there is, again, food consumption, there's this symbolic meaning. And returning to the topic of this panel, at one table, the French sociologist Jean-Claude Kaufmann describes the situation within the private household as follows, in my own translation: "Meals now take place in scattered places. Uncertainty has replaced the former order. This begins with the most material aspect of the tables. The tables have multiplied." So I wondered if less and less meals are being cooked and eaten there, whereas at the same time, eating has gained omnipresence in urban life. I was wondering what's going on in the kitchen. And quantitative surveys, as from the health sector, for instance, they give indications that less and less food is eaten and cooked at home, but they only show the majority, and they keep silence about what is happening at the micro level of eating practices, what's happening in the kitchen, in kitchen reality, and what are the conditions. So assuming that, I'm sorry for these, I'm going through these rather boring textual slides quite fast now and come back to some drawings. Assuming that social action and material space interact in whatever way, I adopted a practice theory perspective as described by Theodor Schatzky and others. And in this perspective, to put it in a nutshell, the physical material world, like architecture, the built world, is an inherent part of a social practice, as well as the human body, meanings, identities, etc., and these built units within society. And I thought this theory was quite helpful for me to understand this interrelationship. The complexity of the research object was met by combining methods both of qualitative social research, like I did guided interviews and field observation, along with architecture, and here the analytical classical architectural drawing, like the projection and axonometry. And the first explorative entry into this still, for me, unknown field in a way, except from my personal experience as inhabitant of Berlin, and also eating out quite a lot and traveling quite a lot and eating quite a lot in trains and so on. I started the research with 10 private households in Berlin. Actually, here you see 11 kitchens. This is the reason. In one household, actually, there were 2 kitchens, and in another household, I come back to that later, there was someone who said, I would like to be interviewed in my office kitchen because I'm never using the kitchen at home, so I'm rather in my office kitchen, and that's the place where I want to be and where I want to talk about cooking. And after the first, along the concept of spatialization, I investigated in the interviews. So I asked for spatiotemporal usage patterns. So where do you eat usually during a day? Could you describe it chronologically? And then I asked for the meaning of spaces and their creation, and finally the modification in processual appropriation. So how has your kitchen changed during the last 30 years, for instance? So. And after the first interviews, there was some themes that appeared and that led to, in an iterative process, that led to other places out of home. And together with students, and this was really a very rich resource for me in a way, and it was so great at the RWTH Aachen because I had the possibilities to kind of do research together with the students and in the same way to teach them these empiric methods. And we were going out into the city all together and looking at office kitchenettes, gastronomic venues, rental kitchens, and traffic junctions. Is it better like that? Okay. So between 2000, this is, by the way, the Kantstraße in Berlin, a place that is it's the place to go if you want to have Asian food in any variety. And in this case, there was an exploration of different materializations of the so-called Mittagstisch. So this is the menu that you have during work time for lunch. So between 2015 and 18, more than 100 case studies were examined in this way, and there was some kind of common thread that emerged among the diverse themes in the interviews. So the students also conducted interviews, but the basis of the studies were actually the 10 very intense 1 to 2 hour interviews that I did with the inhabitants of the 10 kitchens in the Berlin households. And the topic that emerged was the prevalent feeling of time scarcity among the respondents. And for a better understanding, the theory of social acceleration, as described by the sociologist Hartmut Rosa, proved to be very valuable to understand this question. Why do they all feel that they don't have time enough to eat, to cook, etc.? He diagnoses a paradox for the present. Even though technological progress is saving more and more time, it appears as if time is becoming scarcer. In other words, it's not about everything getting faster, rather technological acceleration actually frees up time contingents, but paradoxically, time scarcity is still felt. Rosa illustrates this phenomenon with the example of composing an email. If it takes only half as long as writing a letter, but the total number of emails sent far exceeds the number of letters written in the past, mainly due to the rapid response that comes back, time scarcity emerges. But while Rosa supports this theory with various phenomena, he doesn't really explicitly address eating practices. Whereas in my research, it has become evident that the acceleration described by Rosa is particularly pronounced in the realm of eating practices and their specialization. So the interviews exposed a multitude of aspects related to time scarcity, particularly in description of the densely timed everyday life of working young parents who subordinate their eating practice totally to the care of their children. And in one case, one single mother had her breakfast every day in the train to work together with her son, and her son was eating a long roll, really synchronized in the rhythm of the station in a way. And there was also longing for community to be identified. However, it often appears as just a longing for something infrequent, or community was reserved for the weekends as a special event rather than being a routine in practice. So this question, eating at a table, this was something that appeared maybe at special occasions in the interviews. And it was also projected on object. So in this case, the single mom that I just mentioned lives together with her little son in a 2-room apartment. And she says, then I'd really like to have a cooking island. So something where you can invite other people over, where you have enough space, where you can also sit down, something that has an inviting effect. So in her kitchen, there's absolutely no space. It's too small for a kitchen island. But the kitchen island, in a way, was strongly identified with the idea here there would be a community. If I would have this object, I would have more time, more community. We would gather around this kitchen island, and this was something that appeared in several interviews. In another case, here the kitchen of Birgit and Peter, a couple in their late 50s, they describe the gradual shift where they began outsourcing the responsibility of inviting family and friends for communal meals. They said, here it was Birgit who is talking, it was also different in the past. We kind of met more often at home, but that has become less. Now you go out more often. Later in the interview, they explain eating out, or they justify their eating out with the additional time and organizational effort compared to inviting people home. They seem to have less time for food preparation today than in the past. And Birgit has a very limited time window to eat during her lunch break at work, and this was something that dominated the interview. I asked her, I cite, what does eating at the workplace mean in concrete terms? At the laboratory table, so I have to say she's working in a laboratory. So it's actually the laboratory table, not the table in the dining room. There is a changing room, but it's not so that you really want to sit there and eat. There's also a small table and chairs, and you can also sit down there, but you don't want to sit there alone. There's also a toilet next door, inside. That's another thing that doesn't really work for me. That's why I don't like to eat there. So during the day, she and her husband eat sandwiches that they prepare in this kitchen in the morning. And this extreme situation that she doesn't really, that she's having her lunch at the laboratory table becomes even more clear against the backdrop of the description of her previous work. Here she says, I cite, before that, I also worked alone in a practice laboratory for 26 years. The boss was upstairs with a family, and we also had a kitchen. 4 courses were cooked every day. There was a 1-hour break. It was everyone's turn to prepare everything at home and think about what to have for starter or dessert. All 4 of us took turns. It was a big family, and I was there. And then we ate for an hour, and quite comfortably. Now my boss is retired. That's a really stark change for me. This whole culture. You looked forward to the meal, and you actually needed the break too. And that's no longer the case. So with the change in working hours and eating practices, here it seems that The entire constitution of Birgit has changed. Even the point of not cooking anymore at home, where in the evening after work, there I quote, had already passed the point, end of quote, of eating. So she's just too tired, too exhausted to cook. In this case, Anne E., she's a media designer. She also favors eating out to maintain her social contacts and to go to restaurants. But in contrast to the other cases, she initially mentioned atmospheric reasons and not time scarcity. She mentions the desire for variety and sociability and not the additional time effort. But in the course of the conversation, however, another reason emerges. It's fun to eat with several people at first, but I don't want them in my flat. That is, if we are somewhere, that's fine, but I don't want them to make my flat dirty. She loves. So this statement reflects the desire to establish a clear boundary from the external world and the creation or preservation of a personal, private space, symbolized by her clean apartment. Can you still hear me? Yeah, okay, thank you. Which is exclusively reserved for her. And this is noteworthy because she has already moved a significant portion of her private life to public, because she's having breakfast at her workplace and there is a 24-hour catering. And in result, she never cooks in the kitchen. Even the kitchen looks as if she would cook there, but she says she's never cooking there. She's just going to work and starts her day and her eating practice at her workplace. The sociologists Gottschalk and Voss describe this individual drawing of boundaries that she refers to before as a reaction to the excessive demands of the dissolution of boundaries. And they describe that these changes evoke persistences and resistances. And I found these resistances in a lot of kitchens. So people cling to material arrangements they don't use anymore at all. For instance, they keep to a microwave oven, which has turned into some kind of familiar collective resource that keeps just the memory of the aunt who has offered the microwave to the family, and the aunt has already deceased and would be 100 years old now, and the microwave is out of order. And in this case, this keeping to what is there and what is a kitchen is also visible, because you couldn't tell that she's not cooking in the kitchen. I mean, she has even some pots, but she uses the kitchen mainly to watch Netflix and other, to stream and to use some media devices. Because she says, this is the only place in my flat where I do have a table, and it's a pity that I'm not using the other two nice rooms that she has, because there's no table. So she also keeps to the table in the kitchen, even if she stresses that the atmosphere in the other rooms is much nicer. So coming back to the outsourcing of the social venue and the social event and the eating at one table, there are, of course, some opportunities to do so. So here, in this case, this is a rental kitchen in Cologne, where you can also kind of acquire cooking competence, and this is kind of an orchestrated community where you come together for a certain time. Also, you have to pay a fee. And maybe there are also some strategic dinners. That was also a topic that appeared in the interviews that take place there. And there are also other places. And these are more kind of entanglements of different use. So if you wouldn't read what's there at the front window, you couldn't tell what this place is at first. But in fact, it's an outsourced household place, because you could go there and do your laundry. At the same time, it's a place of a cultural venue. People go there, do their homework, they work there, they do music together, and it even has the typical arrangement of a living room, like the TV set. And finally, it's a cafe. So still there is some, you have to pay maybe for the cafe, but it's more what Oldenburg described as a third place, maybe as the place before. So this is just one other illustration of this outsourcing of household activity and thus also building up new communities, maybe not at one table, but at several tables. But coming back to the idea of this office kitchen thing, because and the strategic meal. Let's look at Philip M.'s kitchen. He states that he never cooks himself in his kitchen and always eats out. Since he frequented his kitchen at work more often and had designed and planned it himself in his professional role as an innovation manager, he preferred to meet there in the entrance area of his office as seen here. So if you enter the office in the first floor, you are in the middle of this kitchen setting as I would describe it. However, according to his statement, neither eating nor cooking takes place here. I quote, "Actually, very little is eaten here. The preparation of food is also not intended. There is no stove. As you can see, there is a microwave, but no stove." He explains, "It's not really functionally driven, it's simply aesthetically driven, so how does that actually fit into an overall narrative in an aesthetic one?" Quote, end of quote. In the case of corporate events, in his case, food is prepared by the caterer in another separate and hidden room, so as not to disrupt the, quote, aesthetic narrative here. So his designation of an overall narrative already suggests that the foreground is a narrative that emerged through the physical material arrangement. So this is like a coulisse or a setting. But what takes place here if this kitchen is neither a place for eating nor for cooking? He says, informal work meetings, of course. In such an open context, it's also a work-life blending. So this stoveless kitchen within the office has also a table that is kind of indicating that there should be a table community of at least 8 people sitting there. And I would describe it, referring to Irving Goffman, as a frame or a setting. So this setting is designed to encourage a specific behavior, in this case, the blending work-life. And according to Goffman, control of the backstage is especially significant in the context of gainful employment. And usually the backstage is the kind of the coffee kitchen. Oh, only 5 minutes, so I really have to hurry up. Thank you. But in this case, the backstage becomes front stage, so this is an inversion and the controlled space, and the space becomes totally controlled. So where does Philip eat? At the desk, not in the kitchen. Desk and monitor, that's really it. It's a separate room. So he has thus created his individual's backstage, not at, at his desk, it's a table too. And I don't know if the interviewee's intention actually worked out. During my stay, during the interview, that I could only see him in the kitchen. So of course there were also other cases like this shared apartment, a kitchen for 7 young men, and they were very proud to describe that they were also figuring out a system how they shared the finance, how they managed the care in their house or in their kitchen. But what becomes clear here is, again, they don't eat at the same time at this table. There are no 7 seats there. And they eat in time shifts because they have a totally flexibilized working life and study life. But what they have done is, in the sense of Claude Lévi-Strauss' bricolage, they have added something they needed for their transitory practice. They have added this high table, and they call it bread smearing central. And they use it on the way out, smearing bread for the snack to go. So this is something where the transitory eating practices are really materialized. So I conclude, eating around a table as a community was in the interviews the exception rather than the rule. due to time constraints. Rather, it was shown to be a wishful thinking and ideal outsourced from the home. It was also shown to be used as a strategic instrument of value creation, specialized in settings that imply commonality. The specialization of communal eating practices showed to be determined by social acceleration. But the fact that the specialization of current eating practice is determined by this, it doesn't mean that the how and the where of our everyday eating is solely determined by external, some kind of social structures and that cannot be shaped individually. And I think the case studies provide some suggestions to think about alternatives of the spatial constellations of the lunch break, to think about out-of-home places that enable non-commercial and participatory eating communities, where there is space to be cooked for, but also to cook for the chief who is really a professional, as well for someone who brings something from somewhere to warm it up, and as well for someone who has maybe not enough money to get some food somewhere else. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion, because I know the panel is very well composed in that way too. And there are also indications to think about the coexistence of parallel structures between the city and the kitchen, because I don't think that the kitchen, just because there's not being cooked there anymore, is something to get rid of in the private household. The opposite, because it has taken on new functions and yeah. So I think it's important to have options and choices to try out new constellations. And the last thing is all these possible new spaces that could also emerge due to the change of maybe retail, because there are now new spaces in the ground floor zone available in inner cities. But all this takes time, just like it takes time to make a really good dough for a bread or a yeast dough. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Julia, for this very interesting insight. And I think it's what you brought up is the knowledge of all of us who are living in spaces, in kitchens, who are dealing with food. And I think to bring that together with an academic research is super interesting. Thanks a lot. If there are any questions popping up, please collect it, and we can then afterwards in the panel discussion go deeper into it. We will now go on to our second speaker. It's Maya Scheibler from the studio Scheibler Villard Architects in Basel, and she will speak about LeNa Haus in Basel. Maya Scheibler and Sylvain Villard studied architecture in Switzerland. They also spent some time in Tokyo together studying and working, and in 2012 they founded their own architectural firm in Basel. They have since worked on competition studies and projects, and beside the cooperative residential building LeNa Haus, what they will present today, I want to mention the new extension building Tanne, a competence center for deaf-blind people in the outskirts of Zurich. It's also interesting to look at that as well. Maya Scheibler has been working as an assistant for design and construction at ETH Zurich and was also professor for design and construction at the University of Applied Science in Bern. And currently both of you are taking over the chair of residential building at the University of Applied Science, Nordwestschweiz in Muttern and Basel, and we are very much looking forward what you will do there. But now please join us here on the stage with your insights about LeNa Haus.
Thank you very much for this introduction, and thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy that I can talk now about the LeNa Haus, and especially because since April there are also people living in there. Before I was always talking about what it could be, and now I really also have pictures where there really people live in there, and you can see the inhabitants of this house. We are an architecture firm based in Basel, and also the LeNa Haus is in Basel. Together with our colleague and very good friend, Lukas Baumann, we designed and developed this building for the cooperative LeNa. LeNa stands for Lebenswerte Nachbarschaft, if I translate this in English. That means neighborhood worth living. I think we all, when we look for apartments, we look for a good neighborhood. But here there is, the name is kind of the program. The cooperative committed to complete sustainability, which begins in everyday life and in society. The cooperative wants diverse and inclusive apartments, a cooperative gastronomy, an eco-friendly building, and optimized square meters per person, various cooperative choices, and they want to offer food supplied directly by local farmers. LeNa is based to the neighborhood concept of Neustadt Schweiz. In their text, Neustadt Schweiz describes a culture that is environmentally friendly and resource effective. They want to create affordable housing in which communal and ecological values are central. Also, the neighborhood concept should give rise to less traffic. It is assumed that a well-organized form of self-management is necessary to make the whole thing sufficiently, and that means also cheaper. Here we are in Basel, and you'll know Basel, you can see the Rhine. Do you see it? Yeah. Here, the main station, and also you know that the border of France is very near. We are here, the plot of it's called Westfeld Areal. Here, this white big building, we call it the Klumpen. It's the new built hospital on this plot. And all the colored houses are part of the Areal complex. In the back, you see we call it the ship. It's the old hospital, which is transformed now into an apartment building. And we have here a big living court, housing court, and here smaller buildings which are commercial and office buildings. They are along a main street which crosses the Areal. This Westfeld Areal is developed by Wohnen und Mehr, the kind of the mother cooperative who curated the whole Areal. LeNa itself is an Ankermieter, we call it, which have this pink plot here. Here you see an image of this main street during the Areal, through the Areal, the commercial buildings, the office buildings here, and here you have a view to the LeNa House. This is a rendering from the development phase before it was built. The LeNa House itself has 86 units and offers a living space for maximum 206 people. To realize this, we needed about 6,200 square meters, and if you calculate this together and you come down by a square meter, an average of square meter per person of 33. At 2018, we had in Switzerland an average of square meters per person from 46. So you can compare that. We really tried to make smaller and kind of more dense apartments. We developed a structure that you can see here can have smaller units and also can turn into a bigger unit. So you have here 4 apartments, and this is maybe a 2-room apartment, a 1-room apartment, and a 4, and a 3-room apartment. This you can turn into a 9-room cluster, we call it. A very important part of the LeNa house is that there are all these apartments are smaller than the normal apartments we have now in the surrounded area. Is that there are all these needs, what we need for our everyday life, are shared and are in rooms that the people, the inhabitants, curate by themselves. So we have, for example, a yoga room, a sewing room, a bath, a room with 2 bathtubs. I will come up with this later. We have a library. We have a creative room, a drying space. We have a bar, a rooftop bar, a shared kitchen, which is a bigger kitchen than everybody has in his own apartment. We have a co-working space where you can work near your home, but you don't have to work on the kitchen table. So, and we have a washing room, and very important, the heart of this whole building is the cantina in the street level. Here you see the mix of all the apartments, and we tried to have a very big diversity, and we tried to mix it all up in the house, so the smaller units are mixed by the inhabitants and by smaller groups. Here you see the structure, or the structure of a normal floor. You can see that the rooms we had to really squeeze everything very good together, and we had to take care that each corner is well used. And so sometimes you also find like empty corners, but these are not used spaces. These are spaces that the inhabitants can build in shelves or whatever they need in these kind of corners. So we always thought how they could be used, and they really are now very happy about all these little things that are in these floor plans. Here you see all the levels of the house. You sometimes see these crosses. These are the shared spaces, like for example the library or the yoga room, whatever. These rooms with the crosses, they are 2-story high, so we have smaller rooms of these and also higher rooms that gives it like a bit more space to breathe in this very dense house. Here you see the house from the outside. Here on the left side you see also the 2 other buildings we also designed, but this is like a creative house where there are many different ateliers inside, and on the left side there is an office building for the prosenectute, which is to take care of the people that don't work anymore and need some help, or they help even others. Here you see the main street from the Areal and the LeNa house here. And this is the main address of the LeNa house. Here you enter the heart of the building. It's this the cantina. And here a focus on the floor plan of this part of the building. And here, thank you very much also Julia for your former presentation and all the topics you were talking about. We have here the wash salon in the cantina. We have here an office that organized the whole cooperative daily work. And here we have the Lebensmitteldepot, we call it. It's a storage room for the vegetable. This is connected to a Landwirtschaftsvertrag. This works like this, that the farmer comes there every Tuesday and fills up the shelves, and the people who are living in there, they they buy these vegetables. This storage is 24 hours open, so you can kind of in your own house buy the vegetables like whenever you need it. And also you store it there, so you don't store too much in your own apartment and you can save some space. Here you see the canteen at the lunch time. This is on the left side, there is a bar. Behind you see the take out for the food. And here you see the washing room. We have here some diagonal views to the office as well. And here, this is the storage room. This is Esther. She's taking care of this storage room with a group of people. Like LeNa is very well organized with all different kinds of groups, where every group takes care of a part of the building. Here another view to the washroom, and through the washroom out to the cantina. Here we see the staircase, all in red. On the left side you see a view to these shared spaces, for example the sewing room, and on the right side the shared terraces. These terraces are sometimes also 2-story high and sometimes 1 story. Here you see a view to the old hospital from Fritz Rickenbacher. And here we have a focus to this, we call it Initiativräume, these shared spaces, because the usage of the functions of these rooms are based on the needs of the inhabitants which currently are living there, so this can always change. And this here is this Gemeinschaftsbad. This is also, you can make a reservation and then take kind of a wellness hour for yourself. We had to plan this because there is a need, people want to take a bath, but we wanted to share the space in the apartment itself, that not everybody needs a bathtub. So if you count last year, how much did you use your bathtub? It's maybe 2-3 times, I don't know. Maybe there are some special more, some others who need it more, but normally you can save actually this space and have it shared in your house. Here we see this the normal floor plan works like this. You enter the staircases, and on each level you have this Gemeinschaftsentrée where you access then the apartments, or even also this one of this whole structure can be one cluster together. So this Gemeinschaftsentrée, we call it also consent space. It's one of the consent spaces because you have to deal with your neighbors, how you use it and what's going to happen there. And some, they already made a little playground, others they have just like a gallery there with art pictures. Whatever, you have to share it with your neighbors. In these very small apartments, we took care of that these apartments don't feel small, so we tried to have diagonal views and also like view to another neighbor, but you kind of have this filter like we have it here on the left side where there is the balcony. facade. And also here we have the main room, which is always in every apartment pretty similar. You see on the left side the kitchen, which is made out of massive woods. There was a while where LeNa didn't want to build kitchens in their apartment, so they would really focus everything on the cantina. Then there was like, of course, everything was democratically discussed in the whole cooperative. So then there was like, we could find like a middle way that the kitchens are smaller than in other apartments, but with that we could make smaller kitchens, we could save some money to make this kitchen sustainable and really use massive wood and not the glued wood we all know, which is not wood anymore. So if I talk about this house, I told in the beginning that I would like to show you some people who are living in there and what is their story and how they are living. For example, this here is Pierre. He lives in a single unit here, the dark green part. These are 19 square meters. He don't work anymore, but he still somehow does. He makes some, he's still working, but he's actually retired. Yeah. He lives in here and he has a neighbor who doesn't like to cook. He likes to cook and he has a very, very small Teeküche, we call it. And he sometimes goes to his neighbor and cooks for him and then they eat together. He also uses the Gemeinschaftsküche here in the shared space, and of course he also takes advantage of the Gemeinschaftsterrasse. Here we have a view in his room. This room is really small. I mean, it's 19 square meters. In these 19 square meters, he has his toilet, his shower, and this little kitchen area. But we took care that this kind of room have like not only a frontal view out, but they have also like, they can also look in another direction in the street, which gives you a bit more, which opens up the horizon of this apartment. These are Ursula and Markus. They share together 56 square meters. This is a three-room apartments. Each of them have their own bedroom and then they share a kitchen and living space. When I asked Markus how is it to live in this house, he said for him it's perfect because it kind of feels like he would live in a castle. He has much more rooms than he had before in his further apartment, because he can take advantage of all this shared space. These are Annabeth and Verena. They also share a three-room apartment. They furnished their apartment very nicely. Here you can see this part. It's actually a door. But we also took care that in every apartment which has more rooms than only one, we tried to give one room 2 doors so that you can make other ways in your own apartment than only enter a room by just only this one door. So what they did, they didn't use this second door and they put in there a shelf and could use it that way. Here these are Janine, Christian, Navin and Levio. 4 of them, they live in the 3-room apartment. They have a bigger terrace because in the roof floor, the facade goes back because of the regulations, and they have this big terrace which they really use as a extension of their apartment. They moved into the LeNa house because they really said, as a family in the actual situation, they would need more. They were looking for this community to raise their children, and we all know this sentence: we need a village to raise our children, and I think they really found this village in this house. These are Andrea, Urs, and Niels. Niels is not the dog, Niels is their son, he's not on the picture. The three of them with the dog live in the 4-room apartment. Here you see it, you have the entrance here, and 2 rooms facing the street and 2 rooms facing the court. They used to live 20 years on the land in Basel land in a single-family house. They gave up this house because 3 of their children moved out. They moved into the city, and they wanted to be more near to their children, but also they didn't use the whole space of this big house. And now there is a young family living in there, and they found a place where they also can live in their retired age. Here you see the main room. You also see these diagonals, rooms, views that kind of give a bigger view inside of the apartment. You see also the balcony here to the courtyard side. And here the 5-room apartments of a family with 2 kids. They also like a lot this balcony, which is connected to the other neighbor's balcony by a narrow path, and the kids use it a lot to communicate with the other neighbors' kids, and it makes their everyday life much more easier to connect with other people. This is Frank. I forgot to mention in the street level we also have Wohnateliers, which are in different sizes. So Frank has a 21 square meter area which he uses, but this room is 5.5 meter high, so he could build in a gallery. He works and lives in there, so he has a Schlafgallery with a little desk here, and his art space is down here. He moved from Berlin to the LeNa house because of the neighborhood concept of LeNa. These are Lisa, Thomas, and Noah, who live in 60 square meters. They have also one of these Wohnateliers, but they built in another structure by themselves, so they could have smaller niches for their family life. Here we see kind of a doodle, a Nachbarschaftskreis, which I like very much. They try to find a date to have a dinner together. So the slogan "Lieber gemeinsam genießen als alleine verzichten" was given by LeNa to us in the beginning of the project, and it has accompanied us during the whole project and sums up quite neatly what LeNa was meant to be and has now become. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Maya. I think it's really not very often that architects speak so much about the people who live in their buildings, and I think it was really beautiful to see in some way how we also have to unlearn how we live, that we can enter a building to a space where food is provided, or that we can take a bath together in a neighborhood. So thanks a lot. We'll go now on to our third speaker. It's Gabriela Zegarra, and she will speak about cooking with the landscape, collective cooking and gardening in Peru and Switzerland. And it's our last input, and then the discussion will follow. Gabriela is a Peruvian landscape architect and a PhD candidate in art and design research at the Make Sense program in Basel. Her project, Culinary Return, explores ways of cooking with the landscape between Peru and Switzerland as a regenerative and decolonial design labor. Together with Cucina Alterinas, she digests ecologies of pleasure politics of food into audiovisual and writing pieces, as well as dining experiments. In parallel, she's also teaching at the HGK Co-Create program and is co-running the Food Culture Lab, which is a kitchen and a collaborative lab for interdisciplinary food practices. Gabriela is also a gardener and a cooker, trying to hold and design spaces for reciprocal exchange with nature through food. So I think this is one of the most beautiful CVs I ever read out. So I'm very much excited and looking forward to your presentation.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for this invitation, and to Bernadette and to... Oh, if you need... Great. Awesome. Thanks. Yeah, I'm very humbled to be here among this variety of peers and practices that kind of focus on different ways of seeing our actions as designers in relation also to our responsibility as humans that eat and share. Cooking with the landscapes is actually cooking landscapes. In this sense, it's a practice or a method, as it appears in this paragraph, that tries to carefully source and process food. I'm just going to read it together with you. It exercises situated knowledges based on ecological and ancestral wisdoms of landscapes that we came from and the ones we are currently in. This method recognizes our agency as complex eaters by actively positioning us inside of the living and political systems that feed us. It's non-static and metabolizes as the eater moves, or the landscapes and climate changes. It is advanced by collective ideation and reciprocity acts along the food systems. This is a method that I have been developing, of course, not at all alone. It's based on community practices that started very early in 2019, and as I was doing my master's in Dessau-Roslaus in Sachsen-Anhalt, and continued and reinforced throughout pandemic through collective kitchen and cooking practices, and also through common gardening. So then it grew into a more cohesive practice together with Cocinas Alterinas, as I mentioned. It's a collective practice in between Mayar El-Barkri, who's an Egyptian designer, based also in Zurich, and me. And now it's getting a bit more its shape together with the Food Culture Lab in Basel, and also with the different Gemeinschaft gardens that I'm part of. And also need to acknowledge that these part of the ancestral knowledges are from my landscape of origin, which is Peru. Due to my PhD research, I work there twice a year, and it's not at all a fair amount of time to actually dwell into the extensive type of knowledges that indigenous communities in my country work and support each other and kind of like preserved as well. But as much as I'm trying to dwell further into what a cooking landscape means, it's based actually in one simple concept that it's resuming the word runa. This word comes from Quechua runasimi, that it's the indigenous language of Peruvian Quechua communities in Center Andes. And Marisol de la Cadena, a Peruvian anthropologist, advanced this research together with Nazario Turpo, one of the main leaders of the Quechua communities in Cusco, where I also worked and continue working with. And this idea, this word means landscape, but in the idea of people, that it's inextricably connected and cannot be divided. So it's sort of equates humans as nature as a concept that it's more maybe more attuned into the context that we're in, but it's basically resumed in the connection that it's inseparable between people and land. Runa means people, and people are within humans and non-humans. So when I talk about cooking landscapes, I also want to give a space for us to recognize which kinships, which communities are we actually cooking with. And this is why these 6 points are going to weave us through the 3 different projects that I will present. Hopefully I will not lose you into the complexities of each of the projects, because yes, I'm a landscape architect, but I use the tools that landscape architecture gave me, and also design, critical design sphere practices, and art and mediation practices, all together, melange, and here it comes, like each of the projects that I'm going to show you. I try my best to stay in one path, but I'm a very expanded person, so just like raise your hands if I'm losing you somehow. But these 6 points actually came together with like thinking with the landscape also how to explain what I'm trying to do here. It divides into seasons, synchronicity. This is the reason that to talk about synchronicity is to actually talk about me being in constant movement in between Peru and Switzerland. So I need to understand that my doings of cooking and gardening are also in parallel working or trying to dialogue with the communities that I work with in Peru. Then the agro-calendar activities are basically what do we do around a year calendar. How do we share? And the communities, human and vegetal, these are a clear idea to put both of them in the same table, so to speak. Of course, each of them has its own languages, dynamics, and politics. Then the sharing medium, or like this other part, it's more of how or which type of tools do I use, either from art or design or landscape architecture. So how do we concretely activate this conversation between the 3 first? Then the processes are more referring into what do we do with the food, like how do we treat each other, how do we organize our food events or gatherings, either in the kitchen or outside the kitchen. And the recipes, let's go out of like the common sense of what a recipe is, and let's talk about it as modes of translation, of how do we register or how do we share knowledge for other generations. So the first project that I'm presenting is Uchu, From Seed to Stone. It is based in between 2 landscapes, in between Cusco and Basel. In Cusco, I started during the rain season of 2022. Rain season and dry season will come around quite often. It's just a different way of referring to the mix of summer, spring, and that will be rain season, and the mix of winter and autumn. That's just out of familiarity, but it's a different way of looking into our agricultural calendar. In Basel, it's in late summer on harvest, and the communities that I work with was Landhofgemeinschaftsgarten, the Riquelme family, which is based in Ollantaytambo, and it's an indigenous community of Central Andes, and the Solanaceae garden, which is also a community of tomatoes, chilies, and all different Solanaceae beans. Then my doings were basically gardening, public workshops, performance dinners, and exhibitions. The methods that I use as a cooker were Maran Antonavo, that it's a type of a mortar. This was learned in Cusco, and the Pachamanca, that it's an earth cooking system. And the recipes that came out of these are uchucuta, and which I will explain later, don't worry. Fermentation processes and other various recipes. From the next slide, I will just request a few minutes of deep listening for
Yo me
this
llamo
video.
Isaac. Yo me dediqué bastante en más de mis papás, de mis abuelos, estar en la comunidad. Mi comunidad es en Huilo. Acá de Ollantaytambo más o menos me gustó la cocina, sigo haciendo la cocina, lo que es para los visitantes extranjeros nacionales, igual. Y ahí, acá también, con motivo de trabajo me presenté acá, más agricultura en la chacra, que es orgánico que acá, que me gustó bastante. Yo antes trabajaba siempre con mis papás, agricultura orgánica, que siempre nos comemos, chacra a la olla, si lo llamamos es chacra a la olla, y todos los años viviendo de eso. Para iniciar el trabajo de la chacra es darle un ofrenda algo a la tierra, siempre lo alcanzamos a la tierra para estar, este producto puede salir mejor, dando agradecimiento a la tierra, a los rocas, en la Pachamanca con piedra. Entonces ese trae más o menos una, si le llamamos nosotros como una actividad, que es el ceremonial, es un poco especial antes, pero ahora también queda con los amigos que vienen, entonces se comen bastante también.
Es una experiencia compartida.
Sí, compartida, todo. A nosotros nos enseña de repente a la tierra y nos da frutos, también quien que damos a la tierra, también la comida nos está dando. Entonces es un valor que tiene la tierra adentro, también como una, lo que llamamos ese trabajo, nos da comida de la tierra misma adentro, y nos da un poco el cariño de la tierra para nosotros. Es un reto de repente de los pasados, que todavía existe.
¿Tú crees que podríamos pensar en otra manera de hacer nuestras cocinas modernas que nos conecten más a la tierra?
Sí, podemos hacer las cosas como ver otras realidades, la Pachamanca, o Huaquia, o la cocina andina.
La cocina andina es una reconexión.
Una reconexión con directo las familias humildes en la casa. Directo es la cocina que hacen de lo que es producto de ellos mismos. A veces se pueden saber de nosotros, a veces también de ellos también nos enseñan, como pueden enseñar algo de eso.
La tierra.
So this short film was developed after one of the first encounters during these 2 years of research, and I'm putting a lot of images together, not because I love Pinterest or something, but because I really want to express a certain type of complexity every time that I work together with people or with, as the idea of Runa, or what I'm trying to connect here is like how to think about landscapes as actions, as relationships. So this is an intention of how do I share the knowledge in a context that is completely different, but has so many similarities in the way people relate to food production. In this case, to one specific one that is chili and chilies and tomatoes, which are basically part of also a very important food system inside Basel, but that shares also diasporic communities around it. And the way that I share it was during, when I came back, by growing this garden together with gardening communities and also with friends, with diasporic friends from Latin America and from Asia. And then sharing this knowledge through tasting, through workshops of actively doing the recipe and talking about like why does this recipe actually reminds us of something else. And the uchucuta, which is a spicy sauce in Quechua runasini, actually it's a very simple type of food. It's based on these solanaceae, which can be a tomato or a chili, and also herbs, aromatic herbs. So when I came with this recipe to Basel, suddenly I start understanding other tomatoes and other aromatic herbs from the same people, and where does this come from, and who taught them how to use them, like, and which medicinal properties does this have. So this weaves into also why cooking together and cooking with the landscape knowledges that were transmitted, either you want to call it tradition or ancestrality or indigenous knowledge, which need a really specific connotation, in my opinion, it works around this relationality. And this is the recipe. Finally, it's an act of translation and a way of dealing into social infrastructures that are different from the point of cooking in relation with seasons and in relation with other modes of cooking. The second work, it's a very recent one, just happened in between July and August this year, but it started 1.5 years ago. It's in between Cusco and Basel, and I will just pass a bit faster because I don't think I have much time left. You just let me know, please. But it was together with Cocinas Alterinas, with my collective, and it was the first time actually that as a design collective we wanted to exercise critical perspectives. So how do we do this? As designers, we need to propose something within a context. And we work together with the Gastronomy Research Center in Cusco, in the Andes, Mater and Mil, and this research center and restaurant, a very high-end gastronomy restaurant, has developed a relationship based on 10 years of collaboration together with 2 indigenous agricultural communities, Quechua ones, that are called Misminay and Cajiaracay. And also we met around, 50 different botanical families, because in the Andes, each altitude has a different botanical. In this case, I'm just going to talk along the video to narrate a bit, because this was part of a 3-part essay. It's a tool that I use commonly to actually think with the actions that I do. I filmed it and kind of like overlap the images to follow the path of a specific type of species. Here, for example, we see images from the market that we previously sourced, the relationship in between, for example, the head of the research liquid lab in this case, talking with the engineer agronomist that discussing what are the plants and which methods can be applied based on the season that we were. In this case, was the dry season, and the methods needed to correspond also to the specificity of this plant. Then a bit like the whole, like what you're seeing right now is such a sacred place called Moray, which used to be the what is it called? Agricultural lab of the Incas time, which makes the position of this restaurant and gastronomy research center quite interesting, for not saying problematic, to indigenous communities. And still way that the communities show their knowledge or take a space are through showing the people who come to eat in the restaurant the different capacities of a plant to be used either from for their fibers or for their liquids or for their medicinal purposes, their aromas, their chemical capacities, and so on. The position to start thinking with a restaurant, sorry, I'm going to advance a bit faster, was also through what are the resources that arrive to a restaurant, right? Like they have this displayed, big display of produces that are in between, always changing, right? Like from the Amazon rainforest to the Andes mountain range. And this is a table, this is lying there, but can a table tell you a landscape? Yes, by arranging it, by sharing knowledge that it's able to be translated. In here, during the residency, we focused on the medicinal plants. As you can see, there are the ones that are tagged, that appear from the Amazon rainforest till the steep highlands to the Andes mountain range, because we understood that the plants or the knowledge that they carried were applied in 3 different spaces. For example, here I'm sharing with the Waramis, that are the meaning is knowledgeable women, that produce taints in a way of cooking that is the concha type of cooking, that it's of open fire with ceramic pots, and they do these taints as an ancestral knowledge forever. But the same botanicals in the same season kind of weave into in another process through distillation and through alcohol infusion in the liquids lab together with Manuel. And also the same botanical appears in the kitchen and appears tainting this puree that will later appear in the 8-course tasting menu of this restaurant. What we saw during this residency were exactly who are the people who is sharing the knowledge, and who are we considering knowledgeable, and how do we share with them? So that's why the collective proposed a cooking intervention that started from the spaces of translating, for example, the table into a Tabeltüche that could be laid down in the floor, and ask every people that were from these 3 communities. So we put the research center and the restaurant in one community complex, and then the other 2 indigenous communities were all, sorry, that's my alarm. Do I have still how many minutes? Super. Perfect. Thank you. So in this event, what we wanted to achieve is actually to cook together, like from a community that only engage around food and restaurant, that you will think, oh, but they know each other, you know, they have cooked together. No, they have shared meals. They haven't cooked together. They haven't cooked with their landscape. And when they brought, each of them were asked to bring from 3 to 5 different ingredients according to their capacities and to their accessibility. The ingredients were completely different between each other. The way that to say, okay, we are going to grab the food and create plates. No recipe, just 2 different types of kitchen. The linear kitchen that chefs are used to, and like I'm sure like most of us know that it's like the cooking stove, and then the pachamanca, which is this type of cooking that is the earth cooking method, because we were in dry season and it was possible to do it so. And there was a very beautiful anecdote that can sum up the thread of sharing food, that the main chef that is here of the restaurant wanted to go and do a wok preparation in the linear kitchen, and then the master of Pachamanca, that we don't see it here, but it's Isaac from the first video. Isaac is such an amazing master that he will just say, hey, you don't need to go to the other kitchen, you can actually do the wok thing here while the stones are being heated. And that was just like one turn into the capacity of seeing the act of cooking as a way to also identify other ways, other possible avenues for doing exactly what you're used to do in a repetitive way. And the whole museum transformed into, because we did forgot to mention, we didn't do this action in their restaurant. We moved to the valley into a museum for how can I translate this? For popular art, for Andean popular art, that carry together different tools from also sharing rituals and cooking rituals and food rituals that the communities engage with. And the power of like using objects from a museum collection that actually correspond to everyday life, that was very important for them too. And we, of course, sealed the deal with a very powerful dance after eating, which is the way of digesting in the end. This meal, as I was mentioned, was also an exercise for how do we sit together and what happens when we sit together with people that we do share spaces, but we also have so many intricate differences. I don't have to mention about the impact of colonization in Latin America, especially in Peru, is still very vivid in terms of how do we relate to Andean or agriculture communities when we have the power structure that is gastronomy. So this is a topic that maybe we can explore deeper in further conversations, but we wanted to really create this tension between the kitchen here and the kitchen here and sit in between these differences. The recipes that came out of it were like objects of drawing that kind of translate questions that we had in the moment, and also color objects that kind of storytell the seasonal changes in the botanicals. Quickly gonna end up with the Harvest Moon Dinner, where actually just happened 2 weeks ago in Berlin, thanks to an invitation from Floating University and in collaboration with Monika Kisik and Erin Maltz, and the Milpa Garden. The Milpa has a beautiful story for me that it started by experimenting with associative crops. So I started doing this each season in Basel together with a Gemeinschaft garden in Basel. And this associative crops system actually comes from Mesoamerica, from Mexico. And what I understood also from this collective growing of the plants, was how they carry the lessons of like individuality, but cooperation. And so with these learnings, and also informed by Robin Waldkirmerer chapter on the braiding sweetgrass, around the capacity of how do we create spaces, or how can eating together hold a space for listening to what our food production has to say. Because there's not productive landscapes, there are actually plants. Plants teach, and quote unquote, plants teach in a universal language, and that's food. And therefore, with these lessons, we co-create together with Monika and Eric an experience based on just producing a dinner with squash, maize, and beans. And although we were like highly packed by the distribution of the space, how are we going to orchestrate a 4-hour, 5-hour workshop, dinner course, and collecting recipes from here and there, we ended up with 3 main lessons. The harvesting brought us the lesson of cooperation. How can we arrive to a place that was the floating university in the midst of this season, and harvest and really recognize our landscape through our senses, and through actually engaging with the plants that we seem like passing by and do not care too much. They became our food. And then the cooking was mainly reciprocity. Everybody cooked and everybody proposed their own recipes coming from their own memory or like traditions. And then finally the dining as a collective nourishment moment. It was everybody sharing the story of each of their plates, and how does this recipe came up to be and who did what. So the main question was like, how do we feed each other while feeding the soil bag? And all of the produces that we work with were either harvested here or connected to different community sourcing spaces and farmers, such as tiny farms in Brandenburg, and also the Supercoop, that it's a self-organized market. So finally, the milpa, or like kind of like the design of what the experience was actually more a 50%. The other 50% was brought by the people and was brought by the relational moments with the food and the harvest. So this was very powerful last experiment, because although of course we are very mediatized into what these festivals and art and like the capacities of what we can do together, but when you're in that moment and you give a space for actually dwell into just the action of cooking and all of its extensions, then spatial ways of like dining and cooking just mingle and interweave. I'm going to end up the presentation with one of my favorite quotes from the piece Tenor Eminence from Cecilia Vicuña, who's a Chilean. Well, I don't have to introduce her. She's like amazing. That kind of like sums up a lot of the things that I'm exploring currently. That is, the doing of the hand is not ours alone. It belongs to all the hands that were before us, ours, and those to come. The doing of the hand is the bridge and the union of all hands. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Gabriela. I think you brought something very important also to this symposium, that it's not just about our Western canon, where we stick to functionality and modernism, that the world is much bigger, and that there is a situated knowledge that we also have to find again or talk about or include it, also the knowledge from the global South, which is very often missing in such contexts. So thanks a lot for also bringing up the hand and the body again when we are talking about food. So we'll now go over to our panel discussion, and I want to ask all of our speakers to join me here on the stage. Julia van Mende, Maya Scheibler and Sylvain Villard, Gabriela Zegarra and Lisa Plattner will also join us. So I think we have, is this working? Yeah. We have about half an hour, and it would be also nice to integrate you, the audience, into the discussion, but we have two new guests here. First of all, it's a nearly all-female panel, which is not usual in architecture. So thanks to LeNa and AZ2E that this is possible. But we have also you now here at the panel, and I'm very happy for that. I want to introduce Sylvain Villard. I hope I pronounce your name right. Please correct me. Sylvain, okay. And you're the partner together with Maya Scheibler and from the LeNa Haus project. And we have also here Lisa Plattner. And I want to introduce you very briefly, because you're in some way our bridge to the city of Vienna or the Viennese context. Lisa Plattner studied cultural and social anthropology at the University in Vienna, and she's an expert in the field of food migration and female empowerment. And you're doing a lot of food studies in the urban context. And there's one project why we invited you here to the symposium. It's the Community Cooking Project, which is located in the Brotfabrik in the 10th district in Vienna, and it's a project of the Caritas district work where you're also working at the moment. And I think the Community Cooking Project is quite a successful project here in Vienna, and I think it's nice to see the German, the Peru and the Switzerland background, but also bring it back to Vienna. What is the situation in Vienna here, and what can we learn from these other examples we saw? So my first questions would go to you, Lisa, that you maybe can give us a short insight to the Community Cooking Project, why it's working that well? And also maybe you can also link it a bit to the table, to the topic of our panel's table, at one table. So why do you think is communal cooking or eating also an eco-social practice in the city? So maybe you can give us some insights about the project.
Well, thank you for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here and talk briefly about our community cooking project. As you just mentioned, this is a community kitchen within the former industrial area of the Anker Brotfabrik in the 10th district of Vienna, which used to be Vienna's largest bread factory, and was in parts transformed to different projects, housing, but not only, especially art spaces. And then in 2016, Caritas Vienna started to set up a social space there. So this is quite unique for an NGO to gather so many different art initiatives, but also with a social focus, and create a community kitchen there in the basement, which had the clear goal to reach out to the neighborhood. Since we do neighborhood work, we wanted to invite people from this very multicultural neighborhood, also from the social housing block that was built in just in the neighborhood of the factory, on the former grounds of Anker Brotfabrik. So we literally just wanted to open this house and reach out, and I think we have been quite successful with that. And meanwhile, it's not only neighbors who come to this kitchen, but people from all over Vienna and from other parts. And I don't know if some of you have been there. Everyone is basically very welcome to do that. We have an open kitchen class every Tuesday from 5 onwards, where we try to cook together, use cooking as a tool of exchange, and try out different recipes from various culinary cultures. And it's a very diverse, lively experience that is now maybe a bit hard to describe because I have no videos or pictures. So it's just very beautiful to pass by and see what we do there. So we cook, and in the end, of course, we gather at one long table.
You also told me before that you started, or you were in charge of this project, and it's now really taken over by the community, or you could integrate people and as kind of a self-empowerment also through the process of cooking or coming together, giving it back to the neighborhood. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. So the kitchen has always been a political space. We tried to open it to migrants and refugees that did not have a communal cooking space before. So especially with the crisis in Syria, we started to invite families to cook there and gather there. And we then also tried to employ migrants that had just come to Vienna, especially migrant women from Turkey, from Egypt, from Romania. And they kind of set up that kitchen, and they still organize it. So now I was running that project before for 5 years, but now it's a former employee who has been there from the first day onwards, who is meanwhile the project leader, and brings in hundreds of people.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, maybe we can open it to the whole panel a bit. I would have one question to all of you, and maybe coming from your background or your expertise, you can just comment on it, what your thoughts or ideas would be about that. So I would be very interesting to bring together the relation of different spaces in different scales and how we act in these spaces. We saw the scale of the city today, and we were now debating in our panel about the building, the apartment, the kitchen, the table as spaces that we inhabit. And on the other side, we act in these spaces on a certain way. And there's a kind of relation between the space and how we act or which decisions we take. And we also had that already. It does matter what food we select or how we store food, how we share food, how we prepare food, where we do these things. And we also had these insights that the boundaries between the public and the domestic space are blurring in some way, and that there are different changing in our acting and in our decisions are taking place. So this relation between the spaces we are dealing with and the actions we are taking it's not the static conditions, it's some way a changing field which is over history, but also now in the current moment through the pandemic, but also to certain influences. This relation between the space and our action is in a constant transformation, let's say it this way. So my question is a very simple or cheesy question. It would be, so how would you see the kitchen today coming from your practice or from your research? How did this space change, and also how we inhabit or act in this space? How would you describe for you what the kitchen is now? And I think we saw the kitchen as a place of gathering, of communication, but also, and we will have that in the third panel, as a place of labor where it's taken place. And we were also talking about knowledge which is visible and which is knowledgeable, and other things which are not present. So how would you see, coming from your research or your background, the kitchen today? Which kind of place is that? How would you describe that? And maybe we just can make a round and maybe start with Julia if you want, or if someone has just ideas jumping in.
Okay, thank you for the question. Yeah, I would say it's a place for entangled practices, not only for cooking and eating anymore, first of all, maybe, and also digital devices suddenly play a role, and I think it's a place that cannot be, that needs to be there, even if people don't cook there. And you need to have the choice, and I think that's really very smart in your project in LeNa, because you have the choice. You can decide if you go to the large kitchen with your friends, or if you want to retreat in your more private space. And there's a lot of studies. There is one study of one squatted house in Berlin, Manteuffelstraße, where Käthe Kruse, she lives there for 30 years. She says, it's so nice to have the possibility to retreat, but also to open up to the huge group and to have these choices. And then it's still a gendered place, and there is still going on the question, who is doing the dishes?
And would you say we maybe need also some kind of a new vocabulary, that kitchen is too much connected to functionality, or how we learned what a kitchen has to be? Coming out of your research, do you think we need other kind of spaces, or a kind of vocabulary to describe these in-between spaces where we eat or where we share food or where we gather? Or are you happy with the term of the kitchen?
I think kitchen is comprising really a lot of different things. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm quite happy with. I like the word kitchen. Yeah, kitchen stories maybe, or yeah.
What I think is maybe very interesting is that, especially in housing or development of dwelling, that kitchen immediately brings one picture of what is a kitchen. To everyone, right? And actually, kitchen can be so many different kind of kitchen or spaces. And I think this is maybe the most interesting thing for me, that we can think more typologic, more types of kitchen, and maybe also suggest or produce more variety. And maybe in this project we had the chance to do there we have these different types, and maybe it shows also to other people how can you live with a very small kitchen, or maybe you could live without a kitchen, which is very okay for people who doesn't cook, doesn't love to cook every day, and you can share the other kitchen. So maybe to show the development of in dwelling and housing, that there is just different possibilities,
and in some
more
way
variety.
Yeah, you also did it in your project more or less, that you offered a variety of possible kitchens with the cantina, with the small kitchens in the apartment. Yeah.
I think one thing is very important if we talk about kitchens, or if we talk about kitchen with different people. Or you said it, that you very fast you have an image in your mind, but everybody has his own image. And I think in an architectural space, the scale is a very important part of it. In each kitchen itself, it has to be flexible to different scales, but also you need in your everyday life, you need to have smaller niches to eat or to cook, or also to open up and to go to a bigger space. That's what we do in the city. You know, sometimes we eat in Basel. We have the Markthalle, where you eat in a very big hall, but then sometimes you feel more safe in a smaller space. I think this is something which we always will have, this need for these different situations.
And maybe just one last question to you. Which kind of kitchen did you propose for the LeNa house? Because then you explained the inhabitants wanted some kind of a kitchen, we know, a small kitchen. So was it your idea to just have the cantina in the beginning, or what was your approach as architects?
I think that's the point to talk also about one of the, the inventors of the LeNa Genossenschaft, who is the cook of this cantilena, of this cantina, and he had since the beginning the most clear idea of what LeNa is. So he was the cook of this building, more or less, and for him it was clear you don't need a kitchen in your apartment. You can cook in the Gemeinschaftsküche, or you can come to my cantina and we cook together, or we eat together. I cook. You take your vegetables out of the storage room we share, and what you don't need or what you don't cook, I take in the cantina, so we don't have any food waste. So this was the most clear idea of what it is. And for us as architects, I come back to this. What Jago said this morning, like give us the space to create, and we do whatever we want. So this was very fascinating for us to have someone come to us and say, hey, make apartments without kitchens. So we would have done this if there would not be this. Another one came and said, oh, when we do apartments without a kitchen, we will not find any Mieter, I say customer. So then we found like this middle way, and then we took this again as a chance to say, okay, then let's make small kitchens, but more sustainable kitchens. So we always try to make something out of it. So. Yeah.
But I think a very important part also in this building is that they share a lot together, but the other side, the private space, is also very important. So if you're not in the mood to eat together, you need to have a room where you can eat by your own. Yeah, and because otherwise this community doesn't work.
Gabriela, what would be a kitchen for you? I mean, you are working so different forms of formats and with different groups. So what is the kitchen for you? Which kind of space?
Well, I think a kitchen is defined by its actions and its situatedness. In the past 2 years, I have transformed museums, greenhouses, exhibition spaces, and we can try it up maybe here, into kitchens by the mere fact of people gathering to cook. And this also poses, these learnings come, of course, from the landscape work that I do, and also dwelling into the practices that I showed you, but a lot of these I actually learned in the community kitchens, that you do the best with what you got. And this is also in terms of infrastructure. How can you devise tools to cook or to adapt recipes, and these in the hinterside ends up adapting your choices and needs. And because it's cooking is a lot of labor, of course, but it's also based on pleasure. And if the revolution can be pleasurable out of our feminist perspective, then we're in a good path. And I think kitchens, if we can think about kitchens in terms of cooking, then anywhere can be a possibility of cooking, right? Depends.
Is the kitchen then also a space of resistance? I mean, we live in a world which is driven by consumption and by prepared food. So could the gathering in a kitchen or sharing food also be a form of resistance in a broader sense for you?
For sure. And I think community kitchens, as you were explaining, I mean, it's gardens and community kitchen, community spaces are places of arrival for a lot of communities that are in a constant move, not only for migrants or diasporas, but to take a space in the kitchen to share what you consider as culture and as comfort, as love. It's super powerful, because this could be also, it's for reorganizing ourselves. And I think there's a power over there, and architecture has like so many tools and possibilities to, as I mentioned, like to hold a space. To sometimes it is designing the answer, sometimes it's building, and sometimes it's removing yourself from the picture and see what people bring into the floor for cooking. Because there's a really great Netflix special to Michael Pollan's book that it's the 3 different ways of cooking, and some of them don't even need fire. So if we think about other ways of processing food that are the mere normative ones, by the sole fact of interacting in between, not anymore just our own cultures and identity living in one place, then we can start thinking, okay, maybe there's spaces that will require cooking just with a steam or with hot stone, I don't know. But if we could design thinking around other ways, more plural ways of understanding cook and relations, then there could be a readjustment, I think so, of this kitchen.
So how does the kitchen of the community cooking look like in the Brotfabrik, or what kind of kitchen is?
Well, we were lucky. We had 2 designers, Chmara Rosinke, who did the design for our kitchen in a very flexible and open way. So for us, it's important to see what's going on inside the kitchen, but also to see what we use inside the kitchen. So it's very open, it's not hidden. This also attracts a lot of people passing by or kids coming in. This is one main idea, and we do have a very flexible situations of modules that we can put out of the kitchen and then just enlarge the long table. That is a very beautiful element. And then we have a mobile kitchen that we use to cook in public space. And just as you mentioned, we don't usually use electricity or something. We just use this mobile kitchen to again exchange with people in public spheres. So right now we're doing a project and we cook in 10 different districts of Vienna, mainly beans and lentils again, and try to, invite people to do it together.
I mean, I think we have time. If there are questions from the audience, we could take 1 or 2 questions if there's something you want to know from our guests. Otherwise, LeNa, I don't know if we have time, because panel 3 starting in 15 minutes is for... 5 more minutes. Okay. Is there anything from the audience you want to share? I think one question here.
Again, thank you so much for this panel. It's really, it's a journey. I don't know if it's a question, it's a comment. Listening to all of you, it's so, I can't decide if for the space or for the practice. And I think if you put all together what we heard in panel 1 and now, it's that in between maybe is the topic for your next symposium, because I think that the spaces you create in LeNa show a bit what we need from the community side, and you showed the knowledge, which is, I don't know, a universe. And this, I think it was in the beginning, this is this knowledge field you said we start to discover about foodscapes. And it's taken me quite emotionally. So I think it's really, really a hot topic I don't know, we discussed today. This is my comment. I'm just following all the questions, and it's starting to, I think I start to understand the dimension of the transformation we are in.
Can I add something to this? Thank you very much for this comment. And I also think that this is such an important and such an actual topic we're talking about. We're also teaching in Basel at the FANW, and we teach this and next year about the topic Feed the City, and our semester is called Von der Küche zum Quartier. So it's everywhere cooking right now, and and we also made a symposium, and Caroline Steele came, and we were talking about all these topics. I get very emotional about this thema, but what I really would like is I always meet people who thinks in the same way. I mean, we always talk together and we say, yeah, it's right and it's interesting and we're all doing good, interesting and important work, but I'd somehow like to get more to the people who maybe think differently, and why is it not a bigger part in our cities, and why do we still have so many supermarkets? I mean, we need to talk with them, and maybe for our next symposium, that's why I comment this, would also be interested to have like a contra point. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely can add up to that point, because that's something very critical. I feel that we faced as a community that are advancing other practices and trying to communicate them and trying to create a body of knowledge. Is like, who are we delivering this knowledge to, and what are we doing to democratize it and to render it visible and accessible? Where are these advances going towards? Because let's not be mistaken, while we are sitting here, there's places that are in like deep conflict, and of course we can continue conversations, but we also need the smaller scale actions. It's like to be coherent with your practice, with like what you were showing. I already told you, you're badasses, because this is something that we need to put forward as I believe on this and I want to do it, and let's try to, as we're doing it here, blur a bit the boundaries of disciplines, yeah, but also the disciplinary boundary, and like, where do we learn from? I'm pretty sure that we learn a lot from our clients or the communities that like told you, hey, actually we want a kitchen here, because we can think a lot of our disciplinary guidances, but at the end is who is inhabiting these, and communities are beautiful and positive, but there are a lot of conflict as well. So there are spaces for conflict solving. It's also like what we're dealing with, because food is that it's highly political. It's a lot of pleasure, but a lot of hunger. So maybe in this dichotomy we can talk to others, especially to policymakers and politicians. And good luck, fellow architects, because that's a tough one. But hopefully we're there.
But I think it's super important that we saw the examples, the collection of thousands of possible kitchens in Berlin, or your example with the LeNa Haus, or the knowledge which is already there, or which, I don't know, we need an access to, or which should be visible, and also the example in Vienna. And even if the city of Vienna is still serving 5 times a week meal for children in official schools in Vienna, I think these examples are super important to see that there are other possibilities, and that we are not just looking at other things, that we are also trying to implement it already in the city, even if we are many steps back, or if there's a lot to do. I think all your positions were helpful for all of us to get in a better direction. So thanks a lot for being here on the panel. And I think we will go on at 3 o'clock with panel 3. So there's 4 o'clock. Oh, there's 1 hour break. Sorry. So there's 15 minutes break, there's coffee, water, whatever in the back, and then we are starting at 4 again.